Hello, Motoko Bootcamp. My name is Daniel Strovsky, and I'm the founder of Identity Labs. One of the primary reasons we're all here is because we believe in Web3 and its possibility to create fairness in this world. But adoption so far today is limited, both because there isn't yet enough utility and where there is, it's hard to access. My goal for the next half hour, together with our CTO Philip, is to give you an overview of how identity on the internet computer works so you can make the next killer application. Identity on the internet means having a unique identifier that you can digitally prove ownership of. Mostly, that means an email address or social media handle you prove ownership of by submitting a password that you could be tricked into exposing or could be stolen. And generally, I've never heard anybody saying they love managing 100 passwords. Worse still is that these identifiers are managed by a central authority who has, in some cases, frozen our access to them. Today, with decentralized ledgers, private keys that only we have access to that derive blockchain identifiers that only we control are, we believe, the future of internet authentication. But they're very hard to manage. It was recently estimated that up to 4 million Bitcoin are lost because of lost keys. And most people around the world simply will not use clunky browser extensions or apps. Even those of us that have probably experienced the pain of losing our devices or seed phrases, and some of us may have had our seed phrases phished. So, to solve this problem, we need to simplify private key management. To a team like ours building identity solutions, the Internet Computer is a decentralized web service platform that abstracts the complexity of cryptographic signatures away from users and developers. Nodes in a subnet coordinate to sign messages using threshold cryptography, creating highly secure, simplified experiences for the rest of us. So let's dive in. At a high level, all messages on the Internet Computer are signed. Whether by the user, a smart contract, or a subnet, each request guarantees its authenticity with a corresponding signature. Each request contains a handful of items. There's always a canister smart contract that request goes to, and a specific function that's called with parameters. This message is signed by the caller, and the caller always has a principal. That principal is the default identifier on the Internet Computer, and it's what you'll be using for user identifiers. Now we can explore how users get their own principals. On the Internet Computer, we have the concept of an anchor, which is really just a number in a smart contract. Some wallets on the Internet Computer support the traditional crypto user experience, where an app or plugin stores a private key backed up by a seed phrase that generates a principal and can have multiple addresses to store tokens in. Others, like Internet Identity and NFID, give users multiple ways to sign in and create new principals for each application. One of the most significant innovations on the Internet Computer is that anchors are already account-abstracted wallets. Another is the native support to manage anchors through web authentication, which is a new web standard used by companies like GitHub to let users sign in with the biometrics of their devices or separate hardware security sticks. Web authentication is an API exposed to the browser that creates and stores private, non-exportable keys in secure chipsets on a user's device that are cryptographically scoped to the domain so they can't be used to authenticate anywhere else. On the Internet Computer, the corresponding public keys become authentication methods to the anchor, and because the front end is served from a smart contract, this becomes one of the most secure authentication methods currently available. All major browser manufacturers, Apple, Google, Microsoft, Mozilla, have committed to bringing this technology to market and have. But like any new technology, it will take time to adopt. So other Internet Computer wallets support signing in with Web 2 or Web 3 as a starting point. Let's look at the sequence for how you get an authenticated caller from one of your users. The auth client package is your starting point. It's what instantiates a user session that can live for up to 30 days. Technically, this user session starts with auth client generating a session key passed to an identity provider. The identity provider front end authenticates users to their anchor and requests a delegation from its backend. The IDP backend delegates an identity specific for your application and ultimately makes its way back to your auth client. When you receive that delegate, you create an agent on the front end that formats and signs requests back to the internet computer. Whew. Let me kick it over now to Philip, who'll walk you through this process in code.
All right, thank you, Dan, and hello, everyone. I have created a sample repository for this tutorial. It is in our GitHub organization Internet Identity Labs and called Motoko Bootcamp. As a foundation, I have used the Definity's Quick Start 10-minute tutorial. You can find it here. And you should follow along, deploy your own version of that tutorial so that you can easily apply our changes and understand what we did here. So let's do that. I've prepared it locally for me already. I have deployed it. You can find it here. Here you see the deployed version. I can give my name, click the click me button, and I receive this response. Cool. So the next step is what we want to achieve here is we want to get our identity within the backend canister first. So let's bring this to the side. So in order to achieve that, we need to open our backend smart contract, which is currently very small, and we return our principal ID within that query. So here you see VS Code is complaining that we're using principal to text from caller, which doesn't exist yet. So of course, because we would need to retrieve the caller in our query function. Therefore, we add this shared keyword, and on this query, we can retrieve the caller who is executing this function on the front end later. So here with VS Code, when you install the Motoko extension, you get this nice autocomplete, and you can just import it here. So when we did this change, we can go ahead and deploy. So when this is done, we can go to our deployed version here, refresh, give the name, click me, and now you see your principal ID is this string. So that is by default the anonymous identity. So what we want to do here, of course, is we want to, in the next step, get a real identity from, or an authenticated identity from Internet Identity, which is one of the identity provider for the internet computer. To achieve that, the first thing is we need to install the client-side package, the auth client. It comes from Definity, and you can use npm to do so. Let's do that. The next thing is we will add some markup to the HTML file, a login button with an ID, and a div container to host our principal ID so that we can easily compare what we have in the backend and what we have on the front end side. So you can find the HTML file on the source, Motoko Bootcamp frontend, source, index.html, and here we just place it after the breaks. The next thing is we need to attach an on-click handler on this button. So I'm using just vanilla JavaScript here for simplicity. For sure, you will use your own front-end library of choice and adapt those changes accordingly. So the first thing is we need to import the auth client. Let's do that. We will create a global variable to host our instance from the auth client class. We will have some helper to bootstrap or to initialize the auth client. And then we go ahead and create first our click handler. We just do the same thing here, like we query element by ID with login, that's what we created, and we add an event listener. Here this line just checks if the auth client is initialized. If no, we throw an error. Otherwise, we call the login function. And we attach an onSuccess handler, and we need to create this function also. Let's do that. And here in the handle success, we will just create a variable, and we retrieve from the auth client the identity, get the principal, and we format it to text. And then we just write it to the inner text of our principal ID div container we have created before. So final step is we just need to initialize here our auth client. So that should be it. Let's again deploy this. Let's refresh. Now you see here, wow, log me in. Cool. It's going to the internet identity because I have already created one. I can just use that. And here you go, you retrieve the internet identity, the principal ID for my identity, which I just have created for this application. So now let's try this. We get the click me and wow, damn, so we still are anonymous. And that is because we need another step. So now the front-end application has received the so-called delegation from the identity provider, but so far we have not made any change to the agent which do the requests to our smart contract. So that is the next step. We now need to use that identity and instruct the agent to use that for all calls. So that is the next step, getting the same identity backend side. For that, we need to go into our index.js file again. We import our actor. Oops, sorry. And we update the handle success function. So what we are doing here now is on success, we just update, we replace the identity of our Motoko Bootcamp backend canister. So let's go ahead and do this. So we can quickly go here. Here we end up on the type definition. You can find this actor in the index.js file. And here you see all these files, these declarations are automatically generated by DFX, and they are based off our Motoko backend code. So I'm pretty sure you have learned about that in some other lecture. So I'm just assuming you have heard about them and just point you to the changes we now need to make. So that is actually all we have to do. We replace the identity with the auth client get identity. So here on the get identity, we retrieve the identity or the delegation which we retrieved on the login function in the onSuccess handler. Or better say, the onSuccess handler is just telling us, okay, the authentication was successful, and then we know we can call the get identity function on the auth client to retrieve the actual identity. So when we have this, we can deploy again. All right, nice. Let's refresh. Now let's do the same thing again. We log in. We get our principal ID again. and you can check when you copy that, it should always be the same thing. So that's like the point. Every time you log in, you will retrieve the same principal ID. So now let's check. Wow, cool. Now, because we have now instructed our agent correctly to use that new identity, our backend retrieves the same string here. So, and this is then how you can make use of that. So in the base library, there are many functions you can use to analyze this identity or to format that identity and use it in your data structures to attach the profile to that user and so on. So, but now let's move a bit on. Let's see what else we can do. Here's one note. You noticed we always deploy this to the mainnet. You can also run this repository or this project on your local replica, as you have learned in the 10-minute tutorial. But from this moment on, because we are bootstrapping now our actors with the identity, which or with the delegation, which we retrieve from internet identity, we now get an error when we just run dfx deploy and click the click me button on our local deployment, because the signature cannot be verified, because now the key from the mainnet differs from the key which you have locally. So there is of course a fix, but that would be too broad now for this tutorial. You can basically deploy all the required canisters in your local replica and then run the full thing, the full setup locally. Then you retrieve a delegation from this local identity provider, and then you get rid of this signature mismatch. If you need help with that, please shoot us a direct message on Twitter, and then we can help you. And we will probably also produce another video illustrating exactly how that works, because it might be useful. So now the next step is we are using here in this case the auth client from Dfinity. So any other identity provider which makes use of that auth client can now be used within that project, and that is what I would like to show you here, how to do that. So in this case we use NFID and configure everything in a way that we then just use NFID as an identity provider. In order to do that, we change the login event handler. We go here to our index.js again. We have here our login handler, and we add these variables here. So let's go ahead. That's a bit nasty. Let's make this a bit smaller, probably. All right. So this sits here. So what is that? So we have some variables. We have an application name, we have a logo, and we have a query config where we use those parameters, and we construct the identity provider URL, which is in this case HTTPS NFID1 authenticate, and taking this query option. So you might wonder what the identity provider is by default, and it is just the auth client specifies just identity.ico.app, and then with like hash authorize. That's like the default identity provider which is used when you don't specify one. But if you specify like this, it will use that instead. So that's it. That is all we need to do, and we can now redeploy that and see what happens. And let's in this case maybe just check here. the identity I'm retrieving. We could probably just adding it here as a comment. So now let's check. Okay, it's deployed. I can refresh. So now when I click login, now you see we are instead navigating now to NFID1. And I can unlock this one here. We have a bit of a different user experience here. I can click here my account, signing in, and now I'm again retrieving my identity. So let's quickly compare this. So, and as you can see, it is exactly the same identity. So this is a special case because I have connected my two identities. So I have connected my internet identity anchor with my NFID account. So both identity provider use the same base anchor with different device configurations. So by this, the user can use internet identity or NFID in the same way. And the same is true for AstroX. For example, with AstroX.me, when you connect those anchors, you will have the same experience. Cool. So now let's check what happens when I click here. Should be exactly the same. Yeah, so nothing changed. I'm retrieving the same identity here. So there is another change we can do. So we can improve the user experience a little bit. So you might have noticed when I'm clicking login, the browser always opens a new tab. We found that quite confusing sometimes. So from Web 2, we are very familiar with pop-up experiences where we are just seeing a window floating in front, and that is what I want to show you here, how you can achieve that. So the auth client has another config option, which is window opener features, which you configure like that. Basically just a string-based configuration where you define where the window should open to the left from the top, and you can configure like width and height. You can define if it should render a toolbar or not, a location, a menu bar, and so on. So we set all this to 0, which means false. So now when we deploy that again, okay, cool, deployed. Let's make this window bigger so that we see the effect better. Refresh. So now when you click log me in, now you see you get a nice floating pop-up window, nicely formatted without all the navigations and tabs and everything, just very reduced to the max so that the user is not getting confused why there is now another tab opening, and everything is now nicely in front. And everything else should be just the same. Cool. So now I want to show you just one slide other thing. Like when I'm opening this thing in an incognito window, I can show you also the net new registration experience. Here you see now when the system or the browser doesn't recognize me, you will see all the other login options. One of our most popular ones is, of course, the login with Google. So now you see it's creating a new account for me because that email is not associated with my other account. Here you see now I can just say don't trust this device. That will just log me in. Now you see I have a different principal ID here because my user is now different. So my base anchor is different. it's a net new account, or not a net new account because it was already registered, but it's a different anchor from before. So now when I click log me again, using the same account, I can click register or trust this device in the next step. And that is actually registering this browser with WebAuthn, and that's it. So now from this moment on, until I'm closing this incognito window, you will see exactly the same experience with WebAuthn. Cool. All right, so that's it so far. So of course, there are many more options, which Dan will show you in the following slides. So there are many more identity providers and wallets you can use to create this sign identity, which your front end will use to authenticate to the back end. But all those projects have, of course, slightly different implementation details. So we will point you to there to the documentations so that you can just follow along. All right, kicking it back to you, Dan.
Thanks, Philip. There are a handful of options to choose from when adding wallet authentication to your apps. Inner Identity, NFID, Stoic, and Me are available through the browser, and Infinity Wallet and Plug through browser extensions. A couple of these also have mobile applications. Lastly, please feel free to give us a shout by email or on Twitter if you need anything. Thank you.
All
Okay,
right,
welcome
that was
back.
great. That was awesome. Thank you so much. And yeah, I also just want to say before we even get started, we can be pretty flexible with time with these. We spread them apart on purpose. So if we need to go over, that's fine. So Dan, if you want to rant at the end here, I think we would all love to hear it. But let's go ahead and get started on a few of the basic questions. All right, let's see what we got here in the chat first, the Q&A. LA said, I did not understand where the principle comes from when sign in with Google.
Yeah, I was just about to answer that one, but I can just do it voice. So what happens here behind the scenes is that with the Google JWT, we use that credential to unlock another cryptographic device, which we have stored encrypted within our smart contracts. And only your Google account is able to unlock that. And then NFID frontend is using that to create a sign identity to authenticate you to the internet identity canister and calls the get identity with that device. So you can think of it like just another device we are registering for your account, which is unlocked with your Google credential. Is that answering the question?
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe another way, sorry to interrupt, Isaac.
yeah,
Another way to think about it is that on every blockchain, there's a private key that derives new blockchain addresses. On the internet computer, you have what's called an anchor. So there's account abstraction. You have ways to authenticate to your identity, which is a number, and that number is driven by smart contracts on the internet computer that you can receive blockchain addresses from. And the principle is kind of like is almost a blockchain address. And what happens when you sign in with Google, that's just one way to authenticate you to that number, to that anchor. And that anchor is what derives new principles and what derives new blockchain addresses on other chains.
Awesome.
Shall we move on?
Yeah, and if somebody wants to expound on their questions a bit more, raise your hand and I'll give you audio, and then you'll be able to go in deeper if you really want to. All right. Zane asks, how can devs without biometrics on their device test auth?
Yeah, good question. So that's exactly why we have these other options. Google being the first we added. So if you want to test NFID and you don't have a biometric, NFID is actually smart enough to recognize that your device doesn't have a biometric, and so it doesn't offer you to use one. But with the web authentication standard, it allows you to use not just the biometric of your device, but also a security stick. So like a YubiKey is a very popular one. And for people that don't have biometrics on their devices, they could use a security stick as a very secure way of protecting your identity.
Exactly. And in my case, I use a Ledger Nano, and yeah, you can have an app that makes into YubiKey. Zane also asked, in terms of security or decentralization, does NFID have any compromises compared to II and identity?
No, we use internet identity, actually. So NFID is built on top of the internet identity delegation service and anchor service, which is why when Philip was sharing earlier, he said it was a special case that the principles were the same between his internet identity login and NFID login. And the reason is because we're using the same backend. Now, what NFID does is expand upon that. So it gives additional features and compatibility than internet identity currently offers. So from that perspective, there's not a compromise.
We've overseen one question here. We have one question to elaborate why I've received a different principal ID. Can we just go ahead here? So that was basically just because I was using my Google device in incognito, and that Google device was registered on a different anchor. So if I would have used the same anchor, or like that was more like a test setup. So, and when you would register the Google device on the same anchor, you would of course receive the same principal ID. So that what was maybe a bit confusing, but in general with Google or with biometric, you will definitely receive the same principal ID.
Again, it goes back to this idea of what is your identity? What is it that you are logging into? And then what that's the thing that then federates your identity to different applications. So what you're logging into, again, is this anchor, this number. So if you have number 10,000 and you have a way of authenticating to it, which is philip@gmail.com, or he could also log in through the biometric of his computer, then either of those two methods will authenticate him to anchor 10,000. And then that would federate principals whichever way he authenticated, whether through philip@gmail.com or the biometric, it would still federate the same principles over and over and over. But what Philip did later in incognito was he didn't sign in with philip@gmail.com. He actually signed in with philip@identitylabs.000, which didn't authenticate him to anchor 10,000. It authenticated him, for example, to anchor 10,001, new identity.
Great. At
And
NFT.
just very last one is like a follow-up to that. Use two different II anchors in this example. Yes, when if you rewatch the video, when Philip signed in with the Identity Labs email, that was like a net new, absolutely new user registration scenario. So that did end up being a new anchor. Sorry, Isaac. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, no problem at all. Zane also asked here, does login with Google account also work if we deploy the NFID canister locally for testing purposes? And they're asking that because the context is we've all struggled in the bootcamp with authentication and local development.
Philip?
Yeah, that with the and that will be the same problem. Like so we all struggle with that fact. And we need to so what you need to do basically is the easiest way for now is that you just deploy internet identity canister locally. There should be good documentation on how to do that. And as you have seen, the NFID is just a drop-in replacement. So if you want to use that in production later, don't worry, you will just replace the URL and some configuration. So for local testing, you can just deploy internet identity locally and use that.
And Philip, in our NFID SDK package, we have an example folder where it walks you through a local installation.
Exactly.
And the technical reason for that is because every request on the internet computer is signed. And so what's happening is if you're trying to get an identity, a delegation from mainnet, then there's a mainnet signature. And when you try using that delegation to make local signatures, there is a check, a verification check to see if that signature is an internet computer signature. And the problem is that it's a mainnet signature, but your local development process is using local signatures, not mainnet signatures. And there's a mismatch, and you're not able to make authenticated calls locally.
Yeah, and that's kind of a grander scale problem for the IC as a whole. And just local testing, the whole category of local testing can be difficult.
Yeah, we brought that up already for at Affinity sessions, and like there's one solution could be that they just enable the signature verification for the local replica. So I think when we request that often enough, maybe we will have it sometime.
Yeah, well, and I've been telling a lot of beginners, and honestly, and a lot of times when you're early on, it might be easier to deploy and kind of work with things on the main net than getting too hung up on the certain aspects with local deployment. Charles here asks, and it seems like more misunderstanding in the product category. He said, why use NFID alone if we can use Connect IC that can have different login options, including NFID itself? And I think the answer is really like Connect IC is kind of just a utility plugin, but NFID is an actual solution. So like when you connect things, you're getting a fuller, more managed experience for identity rather than an application specific, like, I don't know.
So I just wanted to keep it bare minimum, because Connect IC is basically just a wrapper around different methods. So, and it's kind of always lagging a bit behind of functionality because of that wrapper functionality. But yeah, go ahead. It's definitely a convenient solution to have all those options if you like to. But I just wanted to show like what is the fundamental package, which is how things are working. And from that knowledge, I think you can easily expand to other solutions.
Yep. It also depends on what kind of user experience you're trying to provide your users. So it's absolutely a developer to developer choice, and you should make that choice. NFID on any given day onboards between 500 and 5,000 users to the internet computer, probably accounting for something like 95% of all new users. And you can see on the largest application on the internet computer, Discover, they have just the two options, and they're able to design their two options a little bit differently. So you'll see their NFID button says something like log in with Google via NFID, something like that. And so since then, we've been onboarding about close to 100% of all new users to their application. And so if you provide all the options, then users don't, maybe they're a net new user to the internet computer, they don't have a wallet, and potentially need some guidance. But we've seen bounce rates without NFID of up to 99% when there are new users who don't have a wallet and are required to get some extension and don't have guidance. So absolutely a developer choice.
Also, I mean, that's a good point. At the end of the day, A/B test and look through the
Absolutely.
user experience. And well done on those metrics. That's awesome. All right. NFT collection. I'm not sure if this has maybe been answered before, but he said he missed the last part of Philip's video where he clicked "Don't trust device," and then when he tried again, trust device, he created a new principal ID. Was that already covered a little bit earlier?
Yeah, the high level.
Yeah, not exactly sure what's meant here, but I just wanted to outline what these two different options are. Like when you use Google, what we not notice, or what the front end is telling you here, is that we want to have kind of a progressive enhanced security system. So when you use Google, which is like just basically web authentication or Web 2 authentication, we try to push the user to register his biometric device if the browser or the device has that capability. So that's when you see those two buttons. But it might be that you're sitting on a public computer and you don't want to register that device. That's meant by don't trust the device. So you can just log in temporarily, but the browser will just forget your setup there. And next time you come to this page, you will just be again on this unknown device setup.
Yep, it is really the difference between public and a personal device. And in either case, you're still logged in with the same principal. It's simply in the context of trust device, then you are adding this biometric key. And of course, if it's not your computer, you shouldn't do that. So don't trust it. And that was a solution to the existing problem with internet identity, where there is no option like that. And so if you're on a public computer, or your friend's computer, your family's computer, a computer that's not your own, then there's not really a possibility to sign into it with your identity. But the principle is the same.
Yeah, great. And anonymous attendee asks, do you have the option to remove or replace an email linked to the NFID anchor? And Robert Green asked, in addition, like, would adding another device to the anchor, then removing the NFID email connection inside of the II device management work?
Robert is correct there. Definitely make sure that you have other devices registered to that anchor so that you can authenticate to your anchor before removing the ones that you want to cut the connection for. At the moment, we don't expose that in NFID because we don't. There are a couple things that we want to optimize in terms of device management and security. So as Philip mentioned, we have this concept of progressive security where, of course, we're no fans of Web 2 login on a security level. Like a password is not the best way of securing an account by any means. But of course, the problem is that without a social login like Google, a lot of people just don't enter the space. And so we have a sign in with Google and then a trust device so that you can use biometric auth. And I think that might be where the question comes from. If you sign in with Google, then do your biometric, can we just remove that Google device? In theory, yes. And Robert is correct. Go to Internet Identity and remove that Google device. And we'll have that in NFID as well, but with a little bit more guidance about how to keep yourself secure and what you're compromising in terms of convenience. And of course, with Google, you can have two-factor auth. You can make that secure. So that is always the recommendation. Do multi-factor authentication on your Google account, and that will increase your security by a great amount.
One small addition, like the replace request. So we have that also on our roadmap, so that you're be able to later change or add other social login options, but that's currently not possible.
Great. HGS, does the user need to remember their anchors as in II? Sorry, I missed this in the video.
For Google, no. And that's part of the convenience, is that when you sign in with Google or you sign in with MetaMask, now we also support signing in with Inner Identity and signing in with Wallet Connect. So any wallet. In any of those cases, you don't need to remember your anchors. But in the case of the biometric only or security key only, you do. It is on our roadmap to replace that with something that's more easily memorized. But good catch there.
Great. All right, anonymous attendee, after logging into NFID, are you able to switch between other NFID anchors from the browser?
Yeah, this was a contentious decision we made early on, that we were under the impression people should have one NFID and did not expose a way to switch between. The reason is we decided to do multiple accounts. So with Inner Identity, when you sign into an application, you only have that one principal. You only have the one identity. And so if you want to make another identity for that application, another account, you need a new anchor entirely. And so we found, well, actually, that's not technically necessary. It is totally possible to be able to create multiple accounts, multiple principals for each application on one anchor. So let's not complicate that process. Let's just expose a way to create multiple accounts per application. And so we went in this direction and don't have an easy way to switch, but there is a, you're totally able to. All you need to do is, I guess it's not really all you need to do. It's a little bit complicated. You can clear your cache, or if you're a savvy developer, which I think all of you will be after this bootcamp, you can go into your developer consoles, into the application tab and the local storage for NFID.1, and you'll see that there's some configurations there that are saved, and one of them is that your number is actually saved there. And if you remove that number, then NFID1, the website, won't know who you are and will think you're a net new user. In which case you can create a new one, or you can just change that number to another one that you own and authenticate to that one. So technically, it's totally possible. It's just that we haven't exposed this feature.
But there's indeed one other option. The other sign-in options, you can just give in. But yeah, the problem is you would need to open that in incognito mode, basically. Yeah, it's always a bit hacky.
Well, and I feel like y'all made the right decision in terms of simplifying user experience without like introducing too many different confusing abstractions that seem similar.
Yeah. Yeah, we haven't heard we haven't heard many people wanting multiple anchors. They are a hassle to manage.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's basically always the demand for multiple accounts per application, right?
Yeah.
I mean, why would you need to have multiple anchors? It's most of the time that you just want to have multiple accounts, and that is what you can easily have with NFID per application. When the application developer decides that he wants to allow that for the users.
Exactly. Great. Lee asked, he said, if it's not intellectual property, how are you able to call a Web2 service from your canister? Is this the HTTP out call that's recently come about?
No, that's way easier. So what we do here is it's just the implementation of the Google Web Auth standard. So Google, as you have seen, we transition to the Google pop-up window, and that transitions back to NFID and provides us with a JWT token. And that token is verified backend side and then unlocks the key.
So Philip, is it fair to say it's like a difference between a front-end implementation versus a back-end implementation?
Yeah, kind of. And maybe the detail here is that we have, of course, currently a cloud function which takes that callback. So there is one small Lambda function which takes that web auth n callback, which then retrieves the credential. So that's of course required so that the backend can be sure that we aren't getting cheated here. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, great. So using the front-end API to have the client do some of those calls and passing what the backend needs. I think that's an important lesson for the students as well, because everyone thinks about these limitations. Sometimes they don't think about the ways to get around them like that. Great.
But yeah, I mean, that would be definitely great when we could also have like more HTTP standard or REST standard conform API calls, which we can handle backend side. I'm pretty sure we could build something there, but we just haven't yet set the priority on that.
All right. Well,
I saw, Isaac, that question about from Zane and like a reason to have multiple anchors. And on that note, that's a very good point, that there is like, maybe in some circumstances, you could probably imagine wanting something that can only be accessed by a ledger, but there are other solutions to that we're already working on. So like policy controls. We just released NFID vaults yesterday, multi-sig solution for teams to manage their digital assets. And you'll find there that you can create policies. So if you want to transfer over 5 ICP, then 3 of 7 need to approve, something like that. So point is that we're going to expand that kind of policy and security control, not just to number of approvers, but also the kinds of devices that can approve. And that is something that won't just be inherited by or added to vaults, but also inherited by your personal NFID. So you'll be able to set those kinds of controls on your personal account as well.
That's really cool. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. HG, for apps that require proof of personhood, NFID supports SMS. Is that right?
Yes, kind of. I mean, what exactly does it mean to support SMS? So what we do, and proof of personhood is like, it's a very broad topic, and there are many different solutions to that. And it really depends on how you as a developer, how do you see proof of personhood? Is it enough for you to know that this person went through some video capture? Or that they, completed some kind of challenge of some kind, or that they have a mobile phone number that has been verified to be a mobile phone number that went through a screening process not to be a VoIP number, but an actual paid phone number from a carrier that has been verified by a smart contract like NFID, and that you as an application developer receive a signature from NFID, basically saying that this person who owns whatever phone number they own definitely has a mobile carrier phone number that they went through an SMS verification process for, and this person has not tried to create a different account with you through a different principal to try to get multiple entries into your application. So that last one, obviously, is the one that we have. So when you call our phone credential, that is the proof that you get that this person has a unique number that has never been used to try to create an application with your account. So when you get a message true, then this person has never created, the person with this phone number is a legitimate phone number, non-VoIP, that has not created an account with you. If you get false, it's anything otherwise.
Okay. Anonymous
Okay,
attendee
multiple.
asks, yeah, anonymous attendee asks, what about multiple users sharing a single device, example, a family computer?
So for that, part of the answer is that this is a feature of the operating system. So in that case, I mean, as a user, you have a choice. Do you want to trust the device or not? And if it's a shared family computer, maybe you have a reason not to trust that device. Maybe you just want to continue to sign in and not trust that device every time. And that's an option. But another option is on the operating system level, there are profiles. So if you share a computer, then it might be likely that you have different profiles for your mom, your dad, yourself, your brother, your sister, and each of you have your own passwords to get into the operating system. And when that's the case, then all the biometric keys are also only accessible by that profile owner.
Perfect. HGS, is Dart languages supported on your roadmap?
Yeah, multi-language support for sure.
Awesome. And does anybody want to raise their hand and talk live? We had a lot of text questions this time around. Usually we have a few live ones. Yeah, so I mean, I guess I have a question for y'all. I mean, you both clearly have a great passion for making Web3 accessible, and you've made tremendous strides towards that. I mean, we've got a whole lot of new Web3 devs that we're trying to train up here, who a lot of which we probably share that passion. What are some of the things that like you're excited to see built that take advantage of the new capabilities that you're releasing out here? Because I mean, you put so much energy and passion into building these new capabilities. Like, I'm sure you've been thinking about like things you would love to see students work on, and yeah, I'd just love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, very good question. So I think at one point in my life, I wasn't super bullish on NFTs, but I am now. I think there's still a lot of exciting things to do there, especially as brands come into Web3, and we're seeing a lot of that. We saw a lot of that last year. We're seeing a lot of that this year. But for the developers, there's so much you can do on the internet computer. It's almost overwhelming. Other chains, you kind of are restricted to what DeFi product do you want to build, what NFT product do you want to build. But here, there's a wealth of new design space available to you, mostly because it's not a blockchain replacement. It's an AWS replacement, a Google Cloud replacement. It's a decentralized crypto cloud platform. And I'm very excited to see a lot of these smart contracts starting to work together and building on top of each other. So one of the things that we have been designing for and preparing for is the moment when applications are saying, okay, we want to be able to retrieve, to read and write user data across different of their accounts. So if you want to build like a rabbit hole for the internet computer, and rabbit hole, I think it's rabbithole.gg, is like a way to get users to explore an ecosystem. So and I think Seb had worked on this previously, maybe Isaac, you did too, where you can create some challenges and say, all right, create a profile on Discover, create a profile on District, create a neuron, stake for some amount of time, do X, Y, and Z other things, and now log in with NFID. We'll ask you to approve the transaction to retrieve all this information, and you'd be able to do that. And you'd get a signed message from smart contract saying this user has done or has not done all these different things. And that's something that comes almost trivially on the internet computer that I'm very excited for. We haven't seen any of that really yet, but I'm sure that there's going to be a lot more.
We got so close.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a
Yeah.
$1 billion startup here.
we had this whole grand vision. Basically, we want to gamify the ecosystem, precisely doing what you're talking about. Like, yeah.
Well, yeah, it was a very cool idea. It's just that it wasn't yet, like, possible. But through NFID, we're enabling it.
Yeah, well, maybe one of these students can complete the vision that Seb and I had started there.
Well, they have good instructors for that.
All right, Lee, you're allowed to speak, and you go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Hi, Lee.
Okay. Hi there. Sorry, if I may just ask you the question about the Lambda function again. And what will happen is I had a problem, and I want to know if you could just give me some advice on it, if it's okay. That Lambda function that you coded for NFID that will run for your authentication. I tried from a front-end canister to with an API key to call GPT-3, and to get some prompts running, sort of to change some prompts for a certain application. And I found out that it's not possible. If I may ask, how would you do that problem, having your API key hidden so that it's not exposed in the front end, and try to run it securely through the backend? And yeah, that's
Not
it.
sure if I got the question right.
So for example, like, you would do it. Let's say if I was doing this in Next.js, I would have a serverless function, and I would call it from the front end, right? Then I would call it I would call it API key to query GPT-3, right? Their service with that API key, passing a course of prompts from the user, and I could chain those together and could sort of create content, right? Now that I can do on Web 2, and I can do it with Next.js, but I can't do it through the IC and front-end canister. That's the problem.
Yeah, there might be many different cases. I would propose that we probably connect on that in
Okay,
detail.
sorry. Yeah. No, I apologize.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. I mean, clearly we also had some struggles, mainly related to cross-origin sharing and Lambda functions, but only in local development, basically, I think. But in general, like in order to communicate from Node.js with Internet Computer, there are some explanations like how to set up the identity. Not sure if that was the problem for you, but yeah, I would propose that we connect in Discord somehow. Isaac, that was anyway one question I had, like how can we join the Discord for the Motoko Bootcamp? Is that possible?
You should already. Do you have the contributor role? I believe.
Oh, it might just be me.
You what?
We need to add Philip.
Okay, yeah, we need to add Philip. Okay. And so Lee, what you can go ahead and do is the ask questions channel. You can go ahead and post that there, with maybe screenshots or any other info that might be pertinent. And then we can go ahead and get moving on that. And Dan, we've got our DM. If you just send me Philip's handle, I'll go ahead and get him added to that role in the Discord right away.
Already done.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
No problem. No problem. Awesome. Does anybody else have a question? All right, we've got Dima.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Hi, Dima.
Hi.
Hello. I don't know. Maybe, well, it's outside of the scope of the lecture, but still, maybe you will give some advices on this. So we're trying to build like a protocol, a social protocol that will enable users to build their meta profile of values, and then like meta profile of values is essentially like a set of values, interests, semantically connected, and then you can compare your meta profile against others. And we were planning to use internet identity as authentication, and but then like the main intention to give an opportunity to builders to use our protocol in their services. And the question is like, how can I tell, like, so you need to log in using internet identity to the protocol, and then everyone who uses the protocol in their apps, their users will also need to sign up with the internet identity, but we need to let them know that they are signed in within our protocol. Maybe it's confusing, I don't know.
I think I know what you mean. Like you basically want to have a kind of a microservice, right, to connect those meta values. Is that right?
Yeah, so basically, if anyone is building social app or like, I don't know, like HR app, they can integrate with our, let's call it API at the moment, but like, yeah, with our protocol. And both of them, like this new app and our protocol uses internet identity for authentication. And like, so shall we have some extension of internet identity, because we need to let the services that uses our protocol know that the user is authenticated within our protocol.
Yeah. Okay. I think it might be the cross principal problem.
Exactly.
Mhm.
I think so.
Yeah. So other teams are having this problem. Isaac and Seb had this problem. This is what we were talking about with the rabbit hole to incentivize gamification on the internet computer. And really, primarily, the problem that's solved is if you have different principles across different applications, then how can services read, and in this case read, in other cases write information across principles? Yeah, Dima, did I
Exactly.
get that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So so we are we lead the internet identity working group, and we have been talking about how to do this on a global level within the internet computer ecosystem. So it's an ongoing conversation, but this is what I was talking about, that at the moment it's possible for I guess we would be required to make some changes, but for NFID to be able to expose that. So Dimo, what you would do is you would talk to another developer, and you would say, hey, this is my function, get meta values, and we pass in a caller, and all you have to do is open NFID for a transaction approval message, and NFID will be passed the arguments, what canister to call, what function to call, and it would be your canister, the get meta values method, and we would pass in the caller. And because NFID is the identity provider, we'd be able to make that authenticated call upon user approval to retrieve that information, sign it, and pass it back to the developer. So we're trying to open this ecosystem and solve the exact problem that you're having.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and we've got HG says in the live coding session, the second time login from the incognito window, use a non-Gmail address that was mapped to gmail.com.
Oh, that was an Identity Labs Gmail address. So
Yeah.
we use the Google suite of products to manage email addresses, and so we still log in with Gmail even for that address.
Yeah, the Google Mail servers ultimately solve it, but yeah. All right, great. Anybody in the room have any questions? All good? All right, last chance. Anyone out there? We're already past time, but it's last chance. Going once, going twice. All right. Well, hey, Dan, Philip, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time, and it was just great hearing from you. It's great seeing and getting some updates on all the great things you have going on. And yeah, one last thing I want to mention. You mentioned the working group. For all the students out there, one of the best ways to get involved is in all the various working groups we have out there. So go to the Affinity forum, the Affinity Dev forum. Right at the top is pinned a message about the working groups. There's lots of them, and as you know, Dan and Philip are leading the identity and authentication one. So that's a great way to kind of get involved. In fact, one of them was part of planning this event as well. Everyone have a good rest of your day coding, and we'll see you around.
Bye,
Have a lot
guys.
of fun.
Good
Bye.
luck out there.
Good luck. Yeah.